Welcome, good morning. I'm Eric Feagler, and I'll be your host and moderator for this morning's Web Panels Futures discussion. We've got 6 experts from across Microsoft here to answer all your burning questions about ASP.NET, Atlas, IIS, Windows Presentation Foundation, IE, and Visual Studio. Before I go any further, why don't I turn it over to the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves, tell you which group they're from, and a little bit about themselves, what they do at Microsoft. Lauren?
Hi, my name is Lauren Lavoie, and I work on the Windows Presentation Foundation team, aka Avalon, and I'm a program manager on the application model team, and specifically I'll be talking mostly about web browser applications today.
I'm Nikhil, Kothari. I'm an architect on the ASP.NET team. I've been working on things like server controls, the page framework, and more recently the Atlas framework that we've announced this week.
I'm Shanku Niyogi. I'm Group Program Manager on the ASP.NET team, and I lead up the program management team for ASP.NET as well as the web development tools in Visual Studio.
I'm Chris Wilson. I'm the Group Program Manager for the Internet Explorer team in the Web Platforms and Security.
Hi, I'm Omar. I'm a lead program manager on the Visual Studio Web Tools team. I work on Visual Web Developer and Web Tools inside of Visual Studio.
And I'm Eric Deily. I'm a senior program manager on the IS7 team, and I own support, health, instrumentation, tracing, and logging.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, this morning, we want to move this beyond just purely a question and answer session. We want to have a rich, interactive discussion with you all. So we want to have this little give and take, not only from the panelists, but from you. We'd like to hear about what you've learned and your thoughts and feedback about PDC. We'd like to get some of the feedback, get some of the goods, the bads, the others, as well as some of the burning questions that you didn't get asked during the sessions. We'd also like to hear about the difficult problems you're trying to solve. What are the issues you're facing, and how can the future of Microsoft's web platform help you solve those problems across all the tiers? So we're talking servers, clients, UI, and tools. And of course, for a few ground rules, because there's always ground rules, there's a few things that will be specifically out of scope for this discussion. So today, we're not going to be talking about specific features or functionality that may be delivered in future as yet unannounced releases. So, for example, questions like, what are you doing with ASP.NET 3.0 data grid control would be out of scope. Or asking, what are you going to do with IIS 8.0 or IE 8.0 will also be out of scope. The other thing that we want to kind of avoid is we want to avoid asking specific questions about your own programming problems. So, for example, how do I connect a data grid up to PeopleSoft object in the back end on alternating days with SAP? So we want to avoid those kind of deep intricate questions. If you have those kind of questions, come up after the panel and discuss those with the panelists after the discussion's all over. As well as if we lose any steam here, if we have any bogged down, I got some questions that were asked from international participants across my blog and email. We have 2 microphones at the back of the middle row there for you to ask questions. So who's going to be the first brave soul to pop up and ask a question? Who's got the burning question about Atlas, about ASP.NET, about the web platform? Let's go. We're going to have the 2 microphones right here. Back in the back over here. Go ahead.
So I'm just going to jump in here. A lot of the challenges that we're facing now are trying to support new browsers like Firefox and everything that's coming out. And I'm wondering, with the new competition that's entered into the market, how you guys are going to make sure that you have full support for any browser in the future or browsers now, or how that's going to work, and what challenges or feedback you guys are getting from your other people in the market. Can you guys address that? I guess it's a big challenge. It's a big time and frustration to make sure that we can support that. How are tools or stuff in the future going to address that now that you have more competition?
I can speak a little bit to that, and then others can add. One of the fundamental things that we're doing is trying to take a layered approach and abstract out browser differences so that both our code that builds on top of that doesn't need to continually check for browsers, as well as code that you write. Another approach we're taking to solve some of the problems there are follow sort of a standards-based approach. So we're hoping that by building on standards, our controls embracing HTML and CSS, XHTML, we're minimizing the effects of cross-browser differences. You want to add, Chris?
I can add a little bit to that too. On the tools side, I think we're looking, with the future releases, we're basically looking, and we hear from customers that they spend a lot of time testing with various browsers. So we're looking at doing things in the tool where you can, we already have validation against a variety of schemas, but extending that so that you have better testing capabilities against a variety of browsers as well.
For creating rich internet applications, what would you advise is the technology that we should focus on? On the one hand, we've got Avalon, and apparently Avalon's going to be embedded in the browser somehow. Or should we focus on new technologies that the web designer team is coming up with?
So I think one of the first things you need to do is kind of decide what are the kind of characteristics of your application. In terms of presentation experience, clearly, in terms of Windows, Avalon and Windows Presentation Foundation delivers kind of the richest experience, the user experience to users. What we're doing with Atlas is really taking advantage of everything that the browser can offer, but what you can do on the client can be much richer than that. So the decision really you need to make is from the application standpoint, what are the kinds of reach and deployment characteristics of your application? And then kind of balance that against what's the user experience you want to deliver. So, do you care about building an application that's available to kind of everyone out there? Do you need to deliver an application that doesn't have to worry about what the install base is? So those are the kinds of decisions you should make first. And then regardless of what decisions you end up making, what we're trying to do with WPF as well as Atlas is then provide the best possible user experience for that type of application. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I thought that was a good response.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go over here.
Hi. As an MVP, I see many questions on the newsgroup that complains about CSS2 support in IE at the moment, but also in the future, because I heard that the IE7 will not support CSS2. And the standards are one of the major points of complaint on the newsgroups, on ASP.NET newsgroups. Why Microsoft isn't going to fully support the cross-browser and CSS2 standard?
So I think what you're asking more broadly, though, is what is Microsoft's strategy to deal with support for industry standards across not only just IE, but IIS and ASP.NET, our tools, correct?
Yes, but people want to use the full support of the standards, and other browsers are going into that direction. Not yet fully supported in other browsers, and the people is wondering why IE7, for example, will not support CSS2. Also because it's a good point of restarting for IE7.
So what is our standards story across Microsoft?
I can answer that question pretty directly, really. First of all, I do think that we've shown a lot of good progress towards getting more CSS supported, better supported in Internet Explorer and IE7. But secondly, I'd point out nobody actually supports everything in CSS2. There's no browser out there that has everything in it.
Yes.
I do think we're doing a lot to move to get better compliance testing, a better understanding of what people really need to use in the real world to help prioritize their development. I think that's been a big change over the last 6 to 9 months.
Don't you think that it's a risk, because if different browsers implement the same thing in different ways, there will be the same pain of the past when you have to look at what your browser to achieve a result? Are you following a standard since the very beginning? Perhaps it's easier to say, hey, if you want to do this, do the standard way. There is a specification and stop.
So are you asking a question about compatibility over time or compatibility, interoperability between browsers?
I think both, because people want to start perhaps with the intranet application and then to expose to the web.
So I think that I do want to state interoperability across browsers is something that we do care a lot about. Certainly, certainly the Atlas team cares very deeply about that. So they've been pushing us a lot to make sure that we do provide the best interoperability possible, so they don't have to fix it up. In short, I also think that compatibility across browser versions for us is important, and that's why we've done some of the approaches we've done, like doc type switching, so that we don't have to keep being stuck in the way that we used to do things. But I'd also point out that the standards themselves change over time as well. CSS 2.1 changes some behavior from CSS 2, and we've had to adjust to that as well. So there are a lot of changes there.
Omar, can you address a little bit about what we're doing in the tools to support standards as well?
Yeah, on the tool side, we definitely are having a lot of features being explored around CSS support. We know that CSS and XHTML are pretty much the future of how you build web apps. So in Visual Studio and in this new product called Expression Web Designer, we're really looking at enhancing full support for CSS so that everything you design, whether you're using the code view or the design view, generates standards compliant XHTML and CSS.
Great, thanks. Back here at the microphone, please.
Following up on the earlier question about the decision to make a smart client or take, say, an Atlas-based approach, we don't have all the information we need to make that decision. We don't know what the market penetration of the .NET runtime is. Microsoft is being quite guarded about that. So when we look at a technology like Sparkle, which requires for deployment the .NET runtime, we don't know what percentage of the world we're giving up as opposed to going with something like Flash. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
I think at this point it's a matter of understanding your customer base and understanding what they have installed. I don't know whether we're planning on releasing any data about penetration of .NET runtime, but I do know that we'll have a good strategy for pushing the new WinFX runtime components out to machines, and I expect that there will be pretty good penetration. That being said, it's very much, it's very important for you still to analyze your customer base and understand whether reach is your main objective or whether providing a richer premium experience for your Windows Vista and WinFX runtime components customers is appropriate for you. Does that help?
Well, it's a trade-off, so the more data we had, the better we would be able to analyze that trade-off.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's good feedback that we should do what we can to get as much data out to you guys as possible, and I will certainly feed that back to my team.
Is Atlas a strategic direction for Microsoft, or is this sort of a short-term project? So
in terms of our strategy on presentation technology, what we firmly believe is presentation technology isn't about having one type of presentation technology with one set of parameters. What we think of strategically, what we think of is there's a continuum of technologies that, depending on some of the factors that you decide in the way that you build applications, things like the kind of reach you want, the kind of deployment you want, the kind of experience you want, the type of customer base that you have, you're going to end up picking one or more points on that continuum. And it may be cases where you have a reach application, and then for kind of additional richer experience and a deeper relationship with your customer, you have a richer thing that you can go and add on. And so what Atlas is basically about is it's about targeting the reach side of the spectrum and then letting you take advantage of the reach technologies that are out there, letting you take advantage of all those capabilities of the browser to deliver a great user experience. If you look at kind of when we came out with DHTML and things like XML HTTP, that was several years ago, and it's only now that these things are becoming common enough in the browser and ubiquitous enough that the really large web developers of the world can actually bet on it being there across their user base. And so that we completely recognize that characteristics of not just reach, but kind of ubiquitousness. And so that's what Atlas is about. It's about being able to target, that base. And so we consider that to be a, strategically important thing. Now, by its nature, things that are ubiquitous, they change over time. And so, a decade from now, it's going to look very different in terms of what's on everyone's machines. But that doesn't mean that we can just kind of not worry about this for over the next 5, 6, 7 years, right? And so we're providing the tools that you can use today for the reach technologies. And then that will then grow over time. So things like WPFE let you then bring in kind of more richness as WPFE starts becoming more prevalent. And you can easily use WPFE with Atlas. And similarly, kind of you can start to then scale that presentation experience up as reach becomes more, as the technologies that we're providing become more prevalent.
So our future release is going to be backwards compatible? So if I design a system or an application on current Atlas, can I...
You're referring to Atlas?
Yes.
So in terms of the release that we have here at PDC, it's a very, very early preview. And we're going to be releasing new updates on a monthly basis. And at this point, we're getting, already we're getting huge amounts of feedback. So the first few releases, definitely expect lots of changes, lots of new things that we're going to be adding over time. Once it kind of gets to that kind of stable point, and we feel comfortable kind of doing go-live betas, et cetera, we're definitely committed to treating it as we would treat any other framework and following the same kinds of rules about compatibility and backward-breaking changes that we do with any other framework that we provide.
Morning. With application stacking in mind, both at the server and at the client level, with ASP.NET 2.0, we'll be able to run side by side with its installation with 1.1 and be able to target applications or application pools to use one or the other. We'd like to have that ability to use actually minor versions so that applications can go to a minor version of an upgrade to the .NET framework just as well as you support major versions. Case in point, when SP1 of 1.1 came out, not only were there fixes, but there were security tightening that occurred that impacted applications. As you approach a server or a client, all the applications that run there have to be able to be running with that new version. We'd like to be able to turn it on at a minor version level. Do you envision that being supported?
Well, from the start, IS7, if you'll notice on your DVDs when you install it, you'll see 4 application pools created by default. There is one actually created for ASP.NET 1.1 application pools. And on IS7, per application pool, you can configure the version of the CLR. So you can either do 1.1 or 2.0. And there's nothing preventing us from the future, if there's another dot release, from setting that configuration such that you could say maybe 2.1 or 3.0 or whatever minor versions. As long as there's an associated CLR version, it's just a matter of configuration for us to tell the worker process which version of the CLR to load at startup. And then it's per application pool, so then you can run your 1.1 apps side by side with your 2.0s as long as they're in 2 different application pools.
And that's the point I was referencing. I'm aware of that, but when you come out with a 2.1, will all the assemblies be named such that it can't coexist on the server with a 2.0?
Second. Oh.
Hi, I am Jonathan Hawkins, a PM for ASP.NET. I have also been involved in some of the versioning work. In terms of being able to lock down to a particular service pack, we actually considered that in terms of WIDBE. There are some pretty severe consequences if you actually lock your app down to, say, Service Pack 1, and we actually put Service Pack 2 on the machine to fix a set of security issues in that your apps will still be vulnerable. So we have considered in the past, if there are particular scenarios that you feel that you actually need to lock down to a specific service pack or QFE, continue to send us the feedback. but we, in the same way that internally security trumps compatibility, I think we have to do goodness for the actual sort of community and for the businesses, is that if we find security issues in the platform and we can put out fixes there, that folks are going to be fixed by default versus their systems being open.
So yeah, in terms of kind of general philosophy, I think over the last year or so, we have had kind of philosophical change in terms of what we do with minor releases like .1 releases or .2 releases. If you notice what we did with 1.0 to 1.1, we actually rolled people forward, and we got a lot of feedback that that wasn't the right thing to do. And so we're not just doing that for 2.0. We basically made a philosophical change that when we go and install 2.1 on top of 2.0, we're not going to roll everyone forward automatically. It's a decision that you go ahead and make yourself. And I think it's not just ASP.NET, but you'll start seeing this a lot more kind of, in Microsoft technologies of really kind of respecting the compatibility issues and the migration issues people have, and not rolling things forward by default. The one key exception to that, as Jonathan said, is we believe very strongly in the ability to be able to service those releases in a way where we can provide timely updates to issues as they come up, because it's not going to be a case where we can provide a completely bulletproof product from day one. And so the servicing level updates is something that we continue to do kind of in place. And it may not be physically in place. It may be an assembly that we put somewhere else on the machine, but logically it's an in-place update. But that we're going to kind of continue to do. But in terms of minor version releases, we're really following a policy where we're not going to roll people forward, and we'll let developers and administrators make that decision.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Shanku. Over here.
Yeah, in the vein of a rich user experience and having the world find it, can you speak to any of the technologies or any new ways that users of MSN Search will find our web browser application?
Are you speaking specifically about WPF web browser applications?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Yeah, we understand that there is a bit of sort of a lack of outward-facing story with respect to search engine optimization and WPF applications at this time. We're working with the MSN Search team to make sure there is a good story there, because we don't want to hit some of the same issues that, for example, Macromedia has hit in trying to make applications searchable. And I'm, in fact, working on that and would be very interested in hearing some of your more specific concerns about it later as well.
All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Over here.
Hi. Yeah, I was curious about, is there any been research or thoughts about unifying potentially web markup and like how we do things within Smart Client or web forms or the WinForms, sorry, in terms of, for example, we're moving to more declarative approach to things. We're abstracting a lot more of it, and you can, with partial types and things like that. For example, for my my company, we have to deliver web-based solutions as well as, kind of your typical rich client, but not with all of the GUI and rich, snazzy features that you can do with a, Win32 GUI, kind of just standard type stuff. So I was curious in terms of, has there been any thought about, because I would think it'd be feasible to in some way or shape or form, because especially with smart clients, how you deploy them, you can deploy them over the web, you can make callbacks, similar type things from a smart client, and you're just delivering markup down, or it's, so does that make sense?
So you're asking about, is there a future where you see a connected application, where it be a smart client or a web, that you can go interface either direction?
Right, in terms of also like designers and things like that too. You generate the same.
So we've actually had several kind of projects where you have user interfaces that are more kind of data-driven generated UI that then target kind of multiple form factors, including smart client and the web. One example of that is the new InfoPath that's going to be in Office 12 actually is able to provide InfoPath forms that run either in the InfoPath client as well as provide a pretty good experience on the web. The one challenge in terms of kind of generalizing that is really what you want to do in terms of the user experience is really optimize for each of the targets and be able to do that. Now we recognize that for some people the key thing is to be able to get that that broad reach for different types of clients as easily as possible. But at the same time, our presentation technology needs to be able to let whether it's graphic designers or developers be able to really target target and optimize each of the different presentation tiers individually. And so the place where we really kind of provide a lot of the unification is in the application model, so that regardless of the presentation tiers you're writing, you can wire up that to your application and reuse all your pieces very easily, as well as things like data formats. And so you'll see more and more in terms of things like XAML being able to provide different subsets of XAML that work in different places, whether it's in the browser or in WPFE or in WPF or in document formats. So by unifying those kinds of things, we make the application development easier. And then on top of that, for scenarios where you do want to kind of have this metadata-driven UI, there are technologies like InfoPath and some other things that we're actually working on in developer division, for example, that you'll see over time.
I think you also want to know about designer interaction with those technologies
Yeah,
as well.
sort of. I mean, I'm just curious how many people really need all of the snazzy, snappy features that you can get within a Win32 GUI in the enterprise space. I mean, we're an enterprise solution ISV provider, and so it's.
Yeah, and I think we start to see a direction where companies are going more and more to really talking about user experience. And the fact is that the internal application user experience matters as much as it does in an external, say, consumer-facing application. Think about, say, a CRM application or something else where somebody spends a lot of time in. If it has a funky UI or something that causes you to have to look around for everything, it takes a lot of productivity and time out. And that's where we're really looking at is Microsoft's kind of stepping back and looking at the user experience from end to end, from the web to smart client. And that's why we're coming out with this Expression line of products plus the Windows Presentation Foundation, so we can enable designers with Expression and developers with Visual Studio to be able to develop those rich applications, whether it be on the client or on the browser. Omar, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing around Visual Studio with the next release?
Yeah, I mean, on Visual Studio, basically, I think it's sort of in the same vein as what Shanku was talking about, where the unification for us really makes sense on the application model and the services that you provide. And based on that, then the tools will let you really target like the richest experience that you want to provide on the presentation layer. So I do think that there's value in having that unification, and we're really focusing on the areas where we think we can provide an application model that sort of works both with a rich client presentation as well as a web presentation.
Right. I know generalizing is difficult. So.
A key thing to kind of remember is like of all the technologies, like the user interface, like the presentation tier is the one that's the source of kind of most constant innovation. And so the way we kind of try to address that is really make high productivity tools to be able to author the presentation tier and then be able to build solid application investments in terms of application model that you can easily reuse, right? If you think back kind of to the world of, hey, if all the UI was done as 3270 screens, right, and we kept kind of bringing that forward, we would, how would we adapt that forward? So we want to make sure that, the way you write your applications is structured so that you can keep kind of providing user experiences that take advantage of the presentation technology, whether it's what we're doing today with the richer interactivity with Atlas or the richer graphical capabilities of WPF, or kind of in the future with things like better speech or handwriting recognition on tablets and so on. You want to be able to take advantage of those technologies to provide a more productive user experience without having to go rewrite your app.
And one other thing is, we do think a lot on the tool side on how to make the experience consistent. So like, if you have UI to do data binding, that consistency, whether you're targeting a client platform or a web platform, we do work in the tools team to make sure that we provide sort of a consistent user experience. So the knowledge transfer isn't something that you have to worry about when you move between building something for a reach platform versus a client platform. So that's another area that we focus on a lot.
Great.
Thanks for your question. Yeah, we really see that user experience coming forward more and more. I think you're going to see a fundamental shift in the market as companies start looking internally at their own applications and realize that it matters as much internally as it does externally. Similar to what Office did for productivity for information workers, the same thing for line of business applications is going to happen across corporate spaces, I think. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Over here.
Yeah, I've got a kind of multi-tier question here. So talking about window presentation files and WPFE, and I guess I'm really confused about how am I going to design for this. So for example, we've got WPF, we've got WPFE that's going out to different devices. I'm looking at the differences in the arrow views and how these are all going to look depending on which OS and which graphics card and which system I have. Am I now going to have a design tool, or my designer's going to have to be looking not only at just different browsers but different GPU level versus which arrow version, which WPF version I'm going to have? I mean, I understand the direction and theme, but could you talk to how we're actually going to reach that? The tools are really good, the code end, but to actually get a good view on the presentation stuff, it's a nice talk, but I'm really not seeing clarity on how I'm going to know what I'm going to get the end use without previewing through 15 different variations. That makes sense?
So I think the question I heard was around how designers can tailor their designs for sort of different configurations, whether you're dealing with WPF, WPFE, as well as different graphics capabilities of various graphics cards. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
The matrix is really gigantic.
Sure. It's a big matrix, I understand. So as far as WPF and WPFE are concerned, we expect that tools like Expression, Sparkle Designer will be able to target both of them, and that anything you create for WPFE certainly will be a subset of the XAML that you can run under full-fledged WPF. So at the very least, you can scale that up pretty easily. Just so
I'm clear, are you saying that the tools will support viewing for the different levels, WPF versus WPFE?
Correct. I mean, I don't think all the details of tool support have been worked out yet, but certainly there are plans that Sparkle will support both WPF and WPFE. And as far as GPU support is concerned, there was a good talk given yesterday by Alexander Stevenson, if you want to check it out, on the DVD. And he spoke a bit about our tiering APIs. And essentially, we will talk about graphics capabilities in terms of tier 1 systems, tier 2 systems, and tier 0 systems, where tier 0 systems essentially have much lower graphics capabilities. And there are tools that your designers can use at design time to validate whether their particular designs will be performant with all those different capabilities of graphics. But essentially, we have a software fallback mode where if your particular design is running on a lower capability graphics card, then we will fall back into software. And there'll be performance degradations of running in software, but those are things you can also detect at design time using those tools.
So the future of the tools is the 3 tiers times the 2 presentation foundations times the browsers. Is that sort of the...
That's one way you can think about it. Obviously, nothing replaces testing here, but I think that it's possible to write these designs such that you don't have to necessarily design more than one version, but simply to understand what the profile is of each machine that you're running on and come up with the right experience for your users. If you want to sacrifice a little bit of richness for more broad reach across different graphics cards and across platforms with WPFE, then you can do that with one design, or you can try to scale it out and provide a richer experience for those who have the better graphics cards.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. Over here.
So I have one bit of feedback on RSS and IIS, and then one quick question on Atlas. It was exciting to see your vision for RSS and expanding that across the platform of Office and Vista and so forth. And I started thinking about ways to use RSS in my applications, but most of those involved authenticating access to those RSS feeds or the files that would be encapsulated in those. And the easiest way it seemed to do that would be with IIS 7 with those pluggable authentication or modules and so forth, because I would need to do some kind of digest authentication. I couldn't use NTLM across the internet. So I guess the feedback is it would be really nice if that was an option on Windows 2003 to have IIS 7, because I probably won't be able to get all my clients on Longhorn. But
you don't know how many times we've heard that feedback. It's been very consistent, and the team line, and right now our focus is primarily delivering it in the next Windows OS, which is obviously Vista and Longhorn.
Yeah.
Right. After that, I will say this, and it's going to sound cryptic, but there are no plans after that, which you can interpret it any way you want. Right. Internally, I think a lot of us have desires to see it go effectively down level, but we just don't know whether or not we'll be able to do that after Longhorn.
So if that's not an option, some other way, or some other story about how to authenticate access to feeds would be helpful. The Atlas question is, seems like that XML script option might be a little more client-side resource intensive than the programmatic JavaScript API that was shown like first and then the XML script second. Could you talk a little bit about the performance impact of using that versus the...
Sure. So one of the things that we've done with the XML script is to provide it as a mechanism to incorporate script functionality without writing script code. That's not to imply that that's the only way. One of the key things that we've done along the way is make sure everything that can be done with XML script can also be done imperatively with just plain JavaScript. So there's no real magic. It's just more of a syntax, if you will. We do have to look at our performance characteristics using that and kind of get real data behind that. So as I said, since everything is doable with JavaScript, it's conceivable what we can actually do is generate JavaScript, the JavaScript equivalent from the server on either wholesale or perhaps for platforms that have bad performance characteristics with XML parsing. So those options are available to us, and we will be going back and looking at performance data as well as real-world usage, all those things factored into the picture.
One other thing I wanted to mention specifically regarding to the RSS security issue. In terms of ASP.NET 2.0 actually has this full kind of membership system that allows you to store in a very secure way things like username, password, credentials. And then you can then go ahead and integrate that with kind of a cookie-based authentication mechanism. And with Atlas, for example, we allow you to authenticate somebody using cookie-based authentication, not through UI, but just through a web service call. And so you'd be able to use a mechanism like that to go and actually authenticate someone on a IIS server, including an existing IIS server, and store those credentials in the membership system.
Would that also apply to the encapsulations, the files that could be included in that feed?
Pardon?
Like the static files that might be included as encapsulations within the feed?
So so static files, there are two ways you can do that. You can either integrate that into the ASP.NET pipeline by including those files. The other thing is you can actually write a native extension on IIS that basically goes out and calls the membership API, because the membership API is available from pretty well anywhere. So you can write an extension that goes out and calls the membership API. In IIS 7, we're actually integrating the membership functionality with the authentication services in IIS 7.
Great, thank you. Over here.
Yes, so for all of us that stuck with ActiveX, what is the migration path and strategy that we can expect from Microsoft, or are we SOL on that?
questions about ActiveX. What are we doing about ActiveX, and what's the migration for using ActiveX?
Yes.
Migration from using ActiveX?
Yeah, are you asking
from ActiveX to WPFE?
You want to go? Oh, you want to move? You're asking how do you move from ActiveX to WPFE?
Any strategies? Any, at Microsoft thought about this issue and they're going to do something about it to help us, or?
So that sounds like you're asking a question about how to migrate from using an ActiveX control as sort of an island of richness in the middle of an HTML page, for example, to using WPF to do the same thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically WPFE, was that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that as the feature set for WPFE gets announced, it'll be much easier to make decisions like that. In general, I don't know if there'll be a migration that enables you to preserve your existing code while moving over. The programming model for WPFE will mostly be XAML and JavaScript from the expectations laid so far. So, I mean, certainly if you have investment in JavaScript, you could probably preserve some of that. But for the most part, I expect it will be pretty wholesale migration over.
So going back on that, if you're on IE7, I imagine ActiveX will still be supported, or is it done?
ActiveX is not going away.
Yeah, ActiveX is definitely not going away.
Yeah, I believe the model for hosting WPFE is actually using an ActiveX control as well.
It does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ActiveX is an underlying technology and will continue to be for years and years. I mean.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks. What's the positioning and what can we expect in the future around consistency now amongst the 3 web designers that you have? Expression, VS.net, and front page?
I can answer that. So definitely the goal is both across Visual Studio and the Expression suite, suite of products to offer a consistent experience. I sort of talked about that a little bit earlier where somebody was asking, if we're building a client app or a web app or an app that's targeting all 3, how do we get productivity to make sure that we're not spending extra time, repeating stuff. And I think on the tool side, consistency is very important to us. I mean, that's sort of the innovation that we offer to customers, where we give you a consistent user experience so that it isn't a relearning process when you switch between one tool and another. Obviously, it takes time to get that level of consistency. Office is like in its 12th release or 11th release, and now they're very consistent across all the tools. If you look at Office in the first release, there was some consistency, but there's always room for improvement. So it's something that we value, and it's something that we're definitely going to be focused on, both across the designer set of products and also in our developer tools.
The other key thing there that's really important to us is kind of we recognize that designers and developers work together, and that we need to provide the right workflows through our tools that really let them interact, not just as a one-way process, but on an ongoing basis in the development cycle. And so we're really building in the right things to help do that.
And I don't know if you went to Sam Spencer's talk on the VS Orcus, but he kind of gave you a preview of what's going to happen between Visual Studio and Expression Web Designer, and be able to share many of the same design characteristics. You can pass those projects back and forth very easily and consistently. Thank you. Question?
Maybe I missed this in the sessions, but I understand that IS7 is part of Longhorn Server, but you seem to have a lot of the code already done. Are there any plans to release IS7 before Longhorn Server?
No. Let me state that absolutely. Yeah. IS7 is going to be on Longhorn, on Windows Vista in the professional, and then IS will also be on the Longhorn Server, as it is on your tech preview of Windows Server.
Yeah, to be 100% perfectly clear, the first time you will see IS7 shipping is on Vista Client. Then you will see it on Vista Server when Vista Server, Longhorn Server, whatever the name of it is going to be, when it ships. On your DVD, you need to install the Advanced Server SKU, because right now we're just finishing up the code to get it in professional and in the client SKUs.
So if you have your DVD pack, it's on the Longhorn Server AD DVD they gave out yesterday at Bob Moo's keynote. Great. Question over here.
Yeah. Hi. I lost my voice during the conference, so I'll try and speak up as best as I can. First, some feedback. the unit testing process in developing web applications is kind of tough because you have the ASP.NET controls that you need to be testing, plus you have the JavaScript side that you need to be testing. Now, I talked to some of the ASP.NET developers on your team, and I understand that there have been some like JavaScript unit testing things that you guys have built. I registered that with them, and I'd like to register it in front of all of you that I would love for you guys to release that into the community because I think that'd be a very valuable thing. Here's to me.
First standing ovation we get here.
Okay. The other question is, oh my God, I forgot my question. I think I have to let this guy go because I totally drew a mental blank right now.
So just to respond to your comment, so as you've seen with both Atlas as well as with WPFE, we recognize that scripting is a technology that people use. We want to make people more productive in terms of doing that. So a lot of the core of Atlas is about investments in providing a better type system, providing a better framework to make script developers more productive. On the tools side, we're also looking at what kind of tools we can provide. So not just unit testing tools, but things like better IntelliSense support in the tools, better debugging support, including things like end-to-end tracing, as well as other things like code coverage and profiling. Those are things that we're looking at in terms of how do we bring script developers into that world and kind of integrate that. And so we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at what we do for kind of the next release of our tools, as well as part of this Atlas community site. We'll be looking at releasing kind of some community tools that help do some of those things in the short term. One of the things, like in Nikhil's talk, Nikhil actually showed a tool that allowed you to capture kind of debugging, tracing input from
that was great,
JavaScript. We'll make that available very soon. And we'll also look at other kinds of things that help make script developers more productive that we can go ahead and release in the short term. But definitely for kind of the next version of Visual Studio, integrating the script development world into our overall tool story is something we care a lot about.
As a script developer who comes from a traditional programming background, I really appreciate that. I guess the question that I was going to ask was about the current existing set of ASP.NET 2.0 controls, like grid view and all this kind of stuff. What's the idea behind Ajaxing all of this or Atlasing all of this? I mean, are these things eventually going to become, like have this kind of Ajax behavior?
I can speak a little bit to that. The plan is definitely to incorporate rich functionality into the existing ASP.NET controls as appropriate. For example, like if you look at web parts today, we do some amount of client-side functionality in terms of drag and drop. You can imagine that will become richer, as well as the editing experience will become richer just as a natural part of web parts. The controls like grid and tree view they do some level of client functionality today. They'll just become richer as we incorporate more scripting features into these controls by virtue of making script much more approachable using the Atlas approach of putting together script components over time.
Now, one kind of key thing to remember is like the Atlas preview release that we put out here at PDC. Our goal is really to make it, really drop that simple to get that, start looking at it. So it's on top of ASP.NET 2.0. The assembly just goes into the bin directory. The scripts go into a script directory. But the flip side of that is we're not making any changes to our 2.0 code for the Atlas preview. And so we want this thing to be something you can very easily install and uninstall, not affect your 2.0 apps. And so over time, what we're going to look at is how do we bring that functionality and integrate it a lot more into the core of ASP.NET. But that will have to wait for the next release of ASP.NET to have that integrated functionality. And in the meantime, we'll continue to make releases of Atlas available that look a little bit less integrated, obviously, but provide a lot of the same experiences so that you all can try those things out and give us the feedback we need.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot for the question.
A little bit in line with what the previous gentleman was talking about. We've been talking about different kinds of technologies, JavaScript, HTML, ASP.NET, Windows Presentation Foundation. But what is your vision for a web development platform? Where are we going to be in the future? Are we still going to be fiddling around with JavaScript and then ASP and then Visual Basic Script and then some other technology and then some Avalon in between? I mean, what is the direction?
So in terms of kind of the direction of where we're headed from a web development standpoint, what we're seeing is, so the kind of core concepts of web development, we think still kind of remain. The web is great for having reach, having great navigation, having this kind of interconnectivity of everything on the web. The question came up about search engine content. Those kinds of things are kind of what we view as kind of the core values of the web. And it's a great delivery mechanism that way as well. So those kinds of things will continue, and we're going to continue to kind of make those better through what we're doing in IIS, what we're doing in our dev tools and frameworks, as well as what we're doing in the browser. In terms of the actual experiences that people have over the web in the presentation technologies, there I think you're going to continue to see web applications, web-delivered applications, be able to take advantage of the latest in the presentation technologies that are available. And in that sense, a web application is no different than a client application. It's just in terms of the delivery, deployment mechanisms, how interconnected they are. Those are the things that distinguish what comes over the web. And so so what you'll start seeing is more richness in the user experience, more taking advantage of WPFE to provide richer interaction wherever it's available, taking advantage of WPF to really have the best experience on the Windows platform. And so the presentation tier will really advance. In terms of then the application model and the deployment model, the kinds of things that we're doing in IIS and the integration we're doing, for example, with Windows Communication Foundation and IIS and ASP.NET, those kind of help build an application using a consistent application model, and then be able to have kind of the latest in deployment tools, administration tools to really help you actually deploy those applications out over the web.
Now I'd like to turn the question around to you as well, though. What are the things that your customers want to do? What are the things that are difficult for you to solve today?
My greatest difficulties are integrating these different technologies that exist on the web right now. I like what Flash is currently doing with their applications. They make it easy to make a rich user interface. That's why I like the promise of Avalon a great deal. To me, it's kind of finally Microsoft is getting into this. Right now, I'm doing a lot of Ajax, and it's a very frustrating experience to be able to provide on the current state of affairs, IE6 and DHTML, to provide a rich user experience. I feel that a rich user experience is valid for every application, be it enterprise or be it a more entertainment or media-oriented user. For every application that we've created in our company, we've always tried to provide a very rich user experience, and we've always built very specific components and everything, but it's always been a very painful experience. And I'm just wondering, when will that pain go away? When will finally I'll be able to work on it? When will there be one platform, one technology to rule them all?
Yeah, we won't go there. We won't go there. There's always going to be competition in the marketplace. There's always going to be competition for all sorts of things, everything from standards to platforms to tools. But if you want to...
I think in terms of a guiding principle, generally, I think the idea is to bring the best of both worlds together, and I think that's exactly what you would love to see as well. There are good characteristics on the web development model, and then there's fabulous things to look forward in terms of the rich client application model. And the goal is to bring the best of both worlds into a single thing.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Thank you. Over here in the white.
Hi. On to older web development platform technologies. Is MSHTA going to ship with IE7, and is there a sunset policy with MSHTA, and are there any pitfalls with MSHTA and IE7?
So there really isn't any change to HTAs in IE7 from IE6. So yes, you can still deploy HTAs. They will still work. I can't think of any effects any specific effects that security changes would have on those, for example. So there was a second part to that question I'm not sure I caught.
Yeah, I've heard in the past that Microsoft wants to sunset the HTA and make it disappear. Is there any stated plan for that?
I think there was a recognition that there were some limitation to the scope of what HTAs could really do. That isn't an attempt to sunset them so much as just they're not the solution for all problems.
Sure. Thanks.
Over here as well.
I'd like to echo the comments of the previous gentleman. Building a rich experience on the web is extraordinarily difficult, as I'm sure all you know that. The specific question is, will it be possible for a WPF web browser application to, at the same time, be in the sandbox, totally secure, and leave the home of the browser? Because once the user finds my application, I'd like to minimize that browser and just have my application up so that they can't hit the back button.
Sure. Are you developing for internet or intranet scenarios?
Internet.
Okay, internet scenarios, at least with this version, web browser applications run in the context of the browser. If you are running in the intranet zone, you do have a greater permission set, and you can do things like create secondary windows. And I expect that as we're able to increase the size of the sandbox, you'll see a lot more things you can do with web browser applications in the future. This is simply a limitation that exists for this version.
Okay, that'd be great, because I think, I don't know, I kind of view in terms of a rich experience, or in terms of any application, really, the web browser is a prototype.
You want to escape the browser. I understand that.
I want to get rid of the browser.
Yeah, currently for this version, if you want to write a WPF application that runs outside of the browser, you'll need to write an installed application. And you can still have, pretty slick web-like delivery with a non-web browser application using click once. So that's the answer for now.
Thank you.
What's the scenario you're trying to solve there? What's the use scenario you're trying to envision there?
Well, we advertise products on the internet, suites of products, and when a user finds us out in the world on a search engine, they come into and look at, we're advertising an apartment, for example. We want them to be able to then stay with us, not hit the back button and look at one of our competitors, for example, but stay with us and have a wonderful experience and a totally safe experience.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Appreciate that. Over here.
I was wondering, I have heard a lot from a lot of developers, of web developers, that they're having a lot of problems with back button. Why don't you add some kind of either an API or an extension in the body tag that allows the web developer to disable the back button for a specific web page or a web application?
So that's a really good question. I think the short answer is because most people probably would want to disable the back button and not allow a user to leave their site. And I don't think that the users would really actually like that very much. That's really the short version. Now, having said that, I do want to say, there is the opportunity to hook into the navigation system. In fact, this is exactly what WPF and web browser applications do, is they have a navigation model internally to allow a richer navigation system inside a web browser application. So it isn't, the typical DHTML application today, you may sit there and provide a lot of codes. The user goes through many steps, and they flip through different tabs that you provide inside your web browser application, inside your DHTML application, I should say. And then suddenly they hit back, and the entire application is gone because you're no longer looking at that page. And the web browser stack that we have in IE says, oh, you were looking at this DHTML app. Now you're going back to however you got here to begin with. And with web browser applications, you actually have a richer navigation model inside the application itself, which I think is really the most important part there, not just hooking the back button specifically.
The other thing we're hoping to enable you to do now is to build, richer web applications with better experiences so that maybe people won't want to hit that back button.
Yeah, but sometimes the people want to hit the back button because they think they are going back to my previous page within my own application, but they actually screw up the application. Maybe not disable the back button is the best choice, as you said, but maybe freeze. I mean, there's actually some ways to play around and don't add the following page to the history so that the back button, doesn't skip that page, but it's actually pretty hard to integrate into applications because you are opening links and moving around from a lot of different places. If there was an easier way, maybe to freeze the stack of pages that get added to the back button at a certain point, so the back button will still work, but actually it will leave my application. It will not try to move around to the previous page that I was displaying within my application.
So one thing Chris mentioned was web browser applications using WPF actually get to provide more integration with the back button, provide actually a logical sort of navigation within your own application integrated with the back button. And there are some techniques that script developers and HTML developers also use in the context of applications that switch between different views and have sort of this logical navigation history. We're going to be looking at that and incorporating some of those patterns into Atlas and kind of build a good abstraction on top of that by providing you a navigation stack and hiding you from the sort of complexities of how it's actually implemented as well. Maybe it's implemented differently across browsers. So that's something that we will be looking at as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're in the polo shirt.
Yes, this is more a general question about WPF and his user base compared to something like Flash. WPF will only be for Windows clients. So, potentially, like the person before mentioned, we're looking at having Atlas, Flash, and WPF application to write. So that's not. What's your general thought on that? And anybody thought about maybe partnering with Apple and creating a done version of WPF for Apple, just so we can have like a web system for everybody or something? Or?
Sure. And I think that's really where WPFE comes into play. WPF, the full platform, really needs to take advantage of a lot of hardware and graphics capabilities and the driver model that exists in Windows Vista and things like that. We don't currently have any plans to take that cross-platform because we wouldn't be able to duplicate the experience elsewhere. With WPFE, we are certainly targeting cross-platform support. And if you attended Michael Wallen's talk earlier this week, you might have seen a WPFE little application running on a Macintosh. And we're certainly committed to making sure that we can get great cross-platform reach there. So if your customer base is such that you need to target cross-platform support, WPFE would be a better bet for you at this point than WPF. That being said, there might be scenarios where your customer base is divided such that you can provide the reach experience as well as the richer experience for your Windows customers if your scenario warrants it.
The way we're kind of envisioning that is, if you start with the reach experience, right? You start with things like Atlas. Within that, then you can then go ahead and add kind of rich islands of functionality using WPFE that work, everywhere where WPFE is available, and then be able to take those investments and then upsize them to WPF and then build on that to build a much richer experience that works on the Windows client.
So that works if we can pretty much assume that WPFE is going to be available for most of our clients. If it's not, then we still have the issue, right? If the user base is practically as good as Flash, then we're good to go. Otherwise, if it doesn't work really well on Apple, there's issues. So do we have we're going to have support on that? We can kind of feel comfortable that it's going to be...
I think it's a bit early at this point to address that.
We're a little early on what we're doing with WPFE just yet. Stay tuned. You'll get more announcements. You can go back and look at Michael Wallen's discussion, and he'll give you some idea of the directions that we're going with WPFE and kind of our commitments around there. But it's too early for us to put set in stone exactly which platforms we're going to be on and how far the reach is going to go. But obviously with WPFE, our strategy is to enable you to have those rich islands of information out there in as broad an area as possible.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Over here, please.
Two questions. One's very quick, hopefully. I am one of those people. I'm actually a savvy internet user, but I have on occasion clicked the back button and screwed up my user experience. I was just wondering if is there like a simple way to trap that and ask the user, are you sure you want to go back? I mean, I don't see that very often, if ever, so maybe it's not possible.
On before navigate?
Yeah. I believe you have the events before navigate as well as unload events where you can actually do something. For example, make sure your data has been saved before you actually tear down the page.
From inside a DHTML web browser application, you can do this. In fact, a lot of pages that I've been to do actually trap the on before navigate events and make sure that the user really wants to navigate away from that page before they do.
So I think that seems like the simplest answer to the problem posed previously. My second question is around security from a developer standpoint who's building, let's say, a web service. They want to enable merchants, I work for PayPal, to access, perhaps say payments, and you want to offer that web service to developers who are using a shared hosted web application. So what they want to do is then access, let's say, PayPal to process a transaction, and we would like them to use a digital certificate. And we have yet to find a really good way to enable merchants to provide secure mechanisms like a digital certificate into a hosted environment to then access our web service. And it's creating some problems and actually making it virtually impossible, at least in 1.1, to actually use our web services in a hosted environment. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about maybe best practices around accessing web services securely.
So there's two kinds of things we're looking at that. One is, actually, before I start on that, so ASMX web services do run in kind of a partial trust environment. The one thing that we haven't, we hadn't kind of envisioned when we designed some of the things like certificate APIs or some of the lower level security APIs is really what's the trust model for using them in a shared hosted environment. And we've gotten that feedback in terms of, from you among others, in terms of how can we make it easier for these kinds of hosted sites to be able to use this kind of programmable web model to go out and use services that are provided by PayPal or other providers. And so we're looking at making things like our certificate API a lot easier to do in hosting environments. Like in 2.0, we've actually done a number of things in terms of enabling some of those APIs to work in partial trust. So that's one side of it. The other side is that in terms of this model where service providers provide a set of services that you can go ahead and easily reuse and then re-expose out of your website so that your smart client applications or your Atlas applications can use it from the browser. We recognize that this kind of model is one of the key kind of building blocks that people will use to put together applications going forward. And so we've started talking a little bit about what kind of things can we do from, not just from a platform perspective, but from a tools perspective to make it very easy for developers to then consume those services as they're putting together their applications. And I think you'll see more on that going forward, but that's definitely a scenario we're very, very interested in for
Thank you. And I'd just like to follow up on that quickly by saying that what I'm talking about right here is simply a point-to-point communication, which you would hope would be possible in an easy way. Beyond that, once that's made possible in a secure way, it would be great to be able to actually have a point-to-point-to-point communication where you're passing through secure data. And, but we got to solve first things first.
So some of the things that we're doing, like InfoCard, for example, where we're enabling, more federated security mechanisms using the technologies that service providers have today, but then using the client as the point to be able to, put that federated security mechanism together. Like those are the kinds of things that we'll look at enabling to kind of make this whole, multi-point programmable web model a lot easier. We're also looking at some models around, today when you use XML HTTP or you're a single homed app, you can only go and contact the endpoint that you came from. So we're looking at, are there models that we can provide for negotiating with the site that you're contacting to get, to actually be able to get permission to make that call. So those are some kinds of things that we're looking at in terms of really enabling this programmable web model more on our platform and tools.
Okay, and I would also like to add, when you do these things, keep in mind that InfoCard may not be installed on every computer.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here, black shirt.
I have some feedback that I hope will float up to the powers that be that in your company that I guess watch these presentations or review them later. But and this doesn't have anything to do with your programs, but my point of view is corporate intranet development, and I can't wait for Avalon to come out.
Great.
Is it going to be moving, lockstep with Vista for XP? Because I know that we're not going to, go forward from XP to Avalon until, to Vista, at least for a year after Vista comes out, because that's the way we do things at our company. I think it'd be a great way to sell, having Avalon come out and being an intranet developer who can say, hey, look, this is what Vista is going to look like, would be a great way to sell Vista. When, so is there any, move to get Avalon out for XP before Vista?
There aren't any plans to release Avalon for XP before Vista. Avalon is going to ship as part of WinFX, which will be a part of Windows Vista, and at the same time, we'll ship WinFX runtime components, which will ship down level to Windows XP and Windows Server 2003. But,
so
we'll certainly pass along your feedback.
And the runtime components will be available at the same time. Just the bits won't be baked before Windows.
Yeah, so from a schedule perspective, we're not going to release it earlier, but earlier we heard the feedback loud and clear, like at PDC 2003, about the need to be able to have things like Avalon work on XP, and so we're going to make it available on XP.
Right, and certainly I think we're in a place where development can start. If you want to target release around the time that we become available on Windows XP and Windows Server. And I expect that with one of our interim releases, we will have a go live license, although we don't know exactly when that will be yet.
Great. Thanks a lot for that question. Over here.
Hi. Is there any plans with IIS 7 to offer server farm management and health monitoring application deployment type functionality that's today in App Center?
So did you hear all that question? I didn't get all your question. I heard that you were talking about IS7 server farms and managing those things.
More around the sort of application deployment to server farms and health monitoring, consolidated view of health across boxes in a server farm.
Great.
Sure. Well, the first step that we have to do is obviously just build a health model for IS7 as a whole. And if you saw Marty Howe's talk earlier about how Windows is pushing the concept of a health model to every team that ships within it, IS is going to be building a health model for that. The next step then, and I think the plan has been, is to use MOM, Microsoft Operations Manager, as a consolidated view of your web farm in terms of being able to view the health of the overall application servers that you're monitoring. As far as the deployment aspect, with IS7, because we're integrated with ASP.NET now, Xcopy deployment of an application becomes a reality instead of just something that worked for ASP.NET and for the rest of your apps you were kind of SOL. We envision Xcopy deployment still being that sort of functionality of pushing bits out to the individual boxes in the web farm scenario. Other than that, there's nothing built into IS7 which will effectively enable a more richer application deployment experience. That being said, there's nothing that would prevent you from writing and extending the admin console that we have, that if you create a new application, it would go off and create that application across multiple servers, right? I mean, the UI as a whole is completely extensible. As you'll see, there's a session at 1 o'clock today by Oscar Omar Garza Santos he'll be talking about how you can extend the UI and the config system to support custom UI, custom config, and I think you could probably bake that in just as easily.
Great, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Question over here.
The idea of using scripting for WPFE scares me a lot because it sounds like I'll be maintaining two separate code bases if I want a WPFE application to scale up to WPF. Why not treat it like the compact framework where you have a subset of C# to program WPFE?
I think the biggest issue there is still the fact that we want to go cross-platform, and we want to make sure that your Macintosh can run WPFE and maybe your Linux machine or any other machine. And so JavaScript seemed to be a good least common denominator there.
Well, sure, but like Flash compiles down into an executable Swift where the language behind it really doesn't matter.
So, so in terms of, for all our kind of presentation technologies that target the script runtime, we're looking at things that can help make non-script developers more productive in terms of targeting that, both from a tool standpoint, and we'll also be looking at from a object model standpoint, how can we provide that consistency that lets you kind of go from one tier to another, one version of the tier to another, without having to rewrite your changes and so on. And so it's still kind of too early to say what kind of things we can do there, but that is definitely a concern that we have heard, and we're kind of keeping that in mind.
Next slide.
Okay. I have hopefully what's not a loaded question. Are you familiar with Macromedia's Flex product?
Oh, that's it. We're not going to be discussing comparative. Are you asking to do a comparative here?
No, I actually wanted to ask a question about what equates to that, especially the caching abilities of that, where you can, I guess the best part of the web is where you can have the latest every time, but if you have an application that's not changing so much, if you have people on a slow link, that can be the worst part of it as well.
Right.
I was wondering, how do you have something go down to the client and then but check for it again, be hosted in a browser, but not get the latest every time?
Sure. So
is that
I
click
think,
once or?
Yeah, that is click once. And there's actually a talk today, I believe, at 1 o'clock about click once and MSI. But the model for using click once for a web browser application is that you'll hit the .wba file, which is the file that gets emitted by our build system when you create a web browser application. And when you hit that file, click once will then go download what you need to run the application. And that application will be cached on your machine, so that on a subsequent visit to that same URL, if you have the current version of the app, you'll run it. But it will ping the server and check for an update. And if there's an update, it will download the updated application as well.
Okay, but as far as the footprint of that, would that require the runtime, whereas the
Correct.
footprint for the Flash stuff would just require the Flash plugin?
Correct.
Because
So,
the security people are concerned about getting run times.
right. So web browser
machines they don't
applications
control.
do require that you have WinFX installed, just as other WPF applications do. So again, referring back to some of the questions we've had about installed base and ubiquity, if that's a big issue for you, then it might be worth choosing another technology or waiting until there's a larger installed base before you migrate.
A couple of things I can add there as well. In terms of the whole bootstrapping problem of the .NET framework and WinFX, that is something that we're looking at for kind of future versions of our framework and our deployment technology. The other thing is just in general, the whole idea of kind of efficiently doing updates is something that from a research and development perspective that is a area of investment for Microsoft, and we've been We're looking at things like how can we, provide updates over slower links, provide, better things like differential compression, and those are some technologies that are kind of coming down the pipe. Some of those you can learn about on the Microsoft research site, but our goal will be to kind of look at how we can use those technologies to improve the deployment experience on a
the bootstrapping is what'll help. I mean, that was the concern was how do I get the runtime there? But if you got that bootstrapped, it's the same then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. Over here in the red.
Yep. One way of dealing with the back button and the navigation problem that we've had is we use one of the design patterns from Microsoft, which was the UIP AB, which is the User Interface Process Application Block. And I think it's not supported anymore. We're still using it. It does a great deal of the job for us. But I was wondering if what's the deal with that, and for Atlas, if we can have a little bit more detail on what's going to be there for the navigation part of a web page or a website.
Let me answer the UIP question first of all. So with our the blocks that the prescriptive architecture blocks that we do, the way that we kind of release those things is a way where we make the source available as a way of kind of prescriptive architectural techniques. They're not kind of completed shipped components that we ship. It's more for architects and developers to look at what are the prescriptive techniques on top of the platform today. At the same time, we then continue to look at how do we take some of those prescriptive architectures and build those things into our platform. So you will see kind of the same set of patterns built on top of .NET Framework 2.0 and ASP.NET 2.0. We're also looking at how do we integrate, and I'm not going to talk about it a lot today, but you'll hear more about it in kind of coming months. How do we integrate things like Windows Workflow into ASP.NET to provide better workflow-driven UI? And so those are some things that we're going to be doing in the platform to make those scenarios kind of easier to build. And then I'll let Nikhil answer the Atlas-specific question.
Well, regarding the back button, as I said earlier, we have discussed some of the techniques that might be useful in that problem domain, and try to make it simple to actually make use of those in an appropriate way. To kind of tie back to what Chris said, the idea is not to allow application developers to simply create a suboptimal experience for users. The idea is to use the technologies in sort of solving problems in expected and intuitive ways that are helpful. And to make that as easy as possible, we'll do the work in the framework to address those scenarios.
Okay, so separating the graphical user interface with the navigation, separating them is still considered a good idea, I guess, right?
Yeah, you still want the ability to navigate, and Chris brought up this point, the ability to navigate easily is a valuable feature of the web, right? The thing and the whole back button paradigm, you see that kind of making its way through a lot of different places where that makes sense. But what you really want is you're not tying that to every page that the browser requests. What you want to do is build a navigation model for your application that makes sense. And there are a lot of patterns. We've done there's been a bunch of work in the Windows team on kind of defining user interface patterns for navigation. What we want to do is kind of take those patterns, let people build navigation patterns on them, including navigation inside the app, as well as what are your entry points into the app, what are the things that people can hyperlink to, and all those kinds of things that really build a value on the web. And then beyond that, the actual within that navigation structure, the kinds of things that cause the page to refresh, we want to provide patterns to make sure that the back button is really following the logical navigation model of your application, not the physical model.
Great, thank you. We've got about time for one more question. Any takers?
No.
Somebody's got to have a good question. Somebody's got to have the good final question here.
Oh, there's one.
Here we go.
It sounds like we should do
I'll get you two. I'll get you as well. Get you both of them.
Yeah, because mine's quick and easy anyway, so
stay here,
I think you guys need an easy one. I'm excited about the bits coming out for Atlas and IE7. When can we expect to see the Atlas bits that will work with the RC that came out this week? And second, when can we expect to see a beta 2 for IE7?
The Atlas RC bits will be available any moment now. This is a personal issue for me because I posted something on my blog that said it'd be available within hours. One of the things is that most of our Atlas team is actually here at PDC, kind of helping out with the Atlas launch, and so the people that are back in Redmond right now are working very, very hard to get that ready. And I don't know if it's been put up yet today, but expect it in the next few days.
You guys haven't been coding in your hotel rooms?
The key differences, there are a couple of kind of compilation system APIs that change between beta 2 and RC, and so that's going to be the only real change between the two.
So I saw that the bits were checked in last night. I think our QA folk are busy sort of dusting them off and getting them tested on the RC build that came out this week. So hopefully within a couple of days, or probably even say early next week, they'll be out there. But the folks internally have been testing them, and things look good so far.
Cool. And then IE7 Beta 2.
And IE7, you'll see a preview of Beta 2 in October, sometime next month. And then, of course, the real Beta 2 will be with Vista Beta 2.
Okay. Make that back button on there huge.
It sounds like we need an entire talk on the back button, perhaps a 400-level talk at the next PDC.
IE7's got a special glowing feature that actually expands out for you.
I think the back button is bigger in IE7.
I think it is.
All right. Over here, last question.
The serialization model that you have for Atlas, will it be pluggable in the sense that can I take the Atlas scripts, the client-side scripts, and use them on, say, Jakarta or Java side stuff?
So what was the question, sorry?
The serialization model within the Atlas client-side scripting, can I reuse it on the JSP side, pretty much?
So we're kind of designing Atlas as kind of an end-to-end framework, and so the goal is that a lot of what we do on the client and what we do on the server are really kind of well integrated together. And you'll see that kind of in the Atlas preview release. Now, the Atlas client-side script library, obviously, consists of JavaScript. It doesn't consist of client deployment. But really, the key value of that kind of comes from the way it integrates with ASP.NET. And over time, Nikhil mentioned, for example, generating some of the declarative script from the server as an option. So we will be doing those kinds of things that really provide the end-to-end framework as a server and client thing.
And specifically talking to serialization, because I think that's what you brought up, we actually do have a close relationship with what we serialize on the client and how it's deserialized on the server and vice versa in terms of preserving type identity from client and server. So even with the preview bits, we actually do have a strong tie between the ASP.NET and the client script library.
Great. Thank you all. I want to thank you for coming out today and listening to the panel discussion. We'd love to get your feedback both on WWASP.NET forums and MSDN forums. And I look forward to hearing you guys and seeing you on the forums, getting your feedback about Atlas, WPFE, WPF, IIS, and IE. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.